Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Have you ever been waiting at a railroad crossing, watching a long train loaded with coal rumble by, and noticed something peculiar? Maybe you've seen giant sprinklers dousing massive piles of coal at a power plant or a port. It looks like they're just giving the coal a good wash, right? But have you ever stopped to wonder why? Why on earth would you spray water on something you're probably going to burn later? Doesn't that seem a little counterintuitive? Well, today we're going to dive deep into this surprisingly fascinating topic. It turns out that this isn't just ordinary water, and the reasons for spraying it are critically important for both safety and the environment. So, stick around as we uncover the science behind why we water our coal. Let's start with the most immediate and visible reason: dust control. Coal, especially after it's been mined and crushed into smaller, more manageable pieces, is incredibly dusty. We're not talking about a little bit of dust you'd find on a bookshelf. We're talking about massive clouds of fine black particles. This isn't just messy, it's a major problem. When a long train carrying tons of coal travels hundreds of miles, the wind whipping over the open-top cars can lift these fine particles into the air. This is what we call fugitive dust. This dust can travel for miles, settling on homes, farms, and natural ecosystems. It can impact air quality for communities along the railway lines and affect soil and water quality wherever it lands. Imagine living near a railway line and constantly having a fine layer of black dust settling on your car, your windows, and even your laundry hanging out to dry. It's a significant quality of life issue. To combat this, a special solution is sprayed onto the surface of the coal. While it's mostly water, it often contains special additives called surfactants or binding agents. Think of these like a type of soap or glue. These agents help the water spread more evenly and penetrate deeper into the top layer of coal. They then help bind the fine dust particles together and to the larger pieces of coal, forming a flexible crust on the surface. This crust acts like a protective blanket, holding the dust down and preventing it from being picked up by the wind during transit or while it sits in a stockpile. It's a simple but incredibly effective method for keeping the air clean and being a good neighbor to the communities the coal passes through. This process is so crucial that it's often a regulatory requirement in many places, with strict rules about minimizing dust pollution. Now let's move on to the second, and arguably more critical, reason: safety. This is where things get really interesting from a chemistry perspective. Coal isn't just an inert black rock. Under the right conditions, it can be surprisingly reactive. One of the biggest dangers associated with storing and transporting large quantities of coal is the risk of spontaneous combustion. Yes, you heard that right. Coal can catch fire all by itself, with no external spark or flame. How does this happen? It's a process of slow oxidation. When coal is exposed to the oxygen in the air, it begins to react. This reaction generates a small amount of heat. In a small pile, this heat can easily dissipate into the surrounding environment. But in a massive stockpile or a densely packed railcar, the heat gets trapped. As the temperature inside the pile slowly rises, the rate of oxidation increases. A faster reaction generates even more heat, which in turn speeds up the reaction further. It becomes a dangerous feedback loop. If the temperature reaches the coal's ignition point, which can be surprisingly low for some types of coal, it will start to smolder and eventually erupt into flames. A coal fire is notoriously difficult to extinguish. It can burn for weeks, months, or even years deep within the pile, releasing toxic gases and posing a huge safety risk. This is where spraying water comes in as a crucial preventative measure. The water serves as a coolant. By dousing the coal, especially during hot weather, the water absorbs the excess heat generated by oxidation, preventing the temperature from reaching that critical ignition point. It effectively breaks the feedback loop before a fire can even start. So, the water has a dual role in fire prevention. It cools the pile, and by keeping the coal damp, it also limits the amount of oxygen that can come into direct contact with the coal's surface, further slowing down the oxidation process. The special binding agents we mentioned earlier also help by creating that protective crust, which acts as a barrier not just for dust but for oxygen as well. It's a multi-layered defense system against a very real and very dangerous phenomenon. Think about the catastrophic potential of a fire on a moving train carrying thousands of tons of flammable material, or a fire at a power plant next to critical infrastructure. The simple act of spraying water is a fundamental safety procedure that protects workers, the public, and billions of dollars worth of assets. But wait, I know what you're thinking. If you're going to burn the coal for energy, doesn't adding all this water make it less efficient? It's a great question. You're essentially adding moisture content to your fuel, and when that coal gets to the power plant, some of the energy released from burning it will have to be used to first evaporate that water. This is a concept known as a heat penalty. Power plant operators are very aware of this. They are in the business of maximizing efficiency, so they don't want overly wet coal. This is why the process is a carefully managed balancing act. The goal is not to completely saturate the entire load of coal. Instead, the focus is on applying just enough of the water surfactant mixture to create that effective crust on the top layer. The crust is typically only a few inches deep. This means that the vast majority of the coal underneath remains relatively dry. The amount of water added is carefully calculated to be the minimum required to achieve the desired dust control and cooling effect, without adding excessive moisture to the bulk of the fuel. The economic cost of this slight reduction in thermal efficiency is far outweighed by the benefits of preventing product loss from wind, avoiding fines for environmental non-compliance, and most importantly, mitigating the catastrophic financial and human cost of a fire. It's a classic case of risk management, where a small, controlled cost up front prevents a much larger, uncontrolled cost down the line. Furthermore, technology in this field is constantly evolving. Companies are developing more advanced crusting agents and foam-based suppressants that are even more effective and require less water. These modern solutions can form a more durable, long-lasting crust that can withstand rain and wind for extended periods. Some systems even use infrared cameras and temperature sensors to monitor stockpiles in real time. If they detect a hot spot where the temperature is rising dangerously, an automated system can target that specific area with water, applying it precisely where it's needed most. This smart, data-driven approach further optimizes the process, ensuring safety while minimizing the impact on the coal's quality as a fuel. So, while it may look like a simple sprinkler, the system behind it is often quite sophisticated. So, to recap this fascinating journey, the next time you see coal getting a shower, you'll know it's not just a random wash. It's a calculated and essential engineering solution to two major problems. First, it's an environmental control measure, using a special crusting agent to lock down hazardous dust and keep our air and communities clean. Second, and more critically, it's a vital safety procedure. It cools the coal to prevent the dangerous chemical reaction of spontaneous combustion, stopping fires before they can even start. It's a perfect example of how a seemingly simple action can involve complex chemistry, environmental science, and risk management. It's all about finding that perfect balance, using just enough water to stay safe and clean, without compromising the fuel's primary purpose of generating the energy that powers our world. It really goes to show that there are hidden layers of science and engineering in so many of the everyday things we see around us, even in something as seemingly mundane as a pile of black rocks on a train. What other industrial processes have you seen and wondered about? Let me know down in the comments below, and maybe we'll tackle it in a future video. Thank you so much for joining me today to uncover this cool piece of industrial science. If you found this interesting and learned something new, do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel out. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.